Hey everybody, a couple folks have already asked me to do the large high strand count tree making videos, and this is the first video in that series. The first thing you need when you're going to make larger trees is a stand to hold them up for you to work on. The larger ones get heavier, and they end up being 4 foot across because you're working with up to 6 foot strands of wire sometimes. So you can't hold on to them and float them like I did in the last video series. They're just too big and too heavy to do that. And I've made about 15 large trees so far. And I've had, a couple different stands to hold them up. And this spring, once it got warm enough, I decided, hey, I'm going to make the, quote, perfect stand for making trees. It's been something I've been messing around with for a long time, and what you're looking at there is what I've come up with. And first thing we're going to talk about is the wire holding jig here. I spent a whole day driving around trying to find the perfect plastic cutting board to make this jig out of, and it was kind of funny. I'm driving around all these stores and banging the cutting boards on my knee and flexing them and checking them out, trying to find the perfect one. And the one I ended up going with was this one right here. I got it at Big Lots. And it just seems to be the perfect plastic for making that wire holding jig, and you can even see there, even BPA free, so it won't mess with your endocrine system. Okay, the first thing you'll notice there, I got those screws sticking in the holes. When you're making larger trees, the trees end up suffering under their own weight a little bit. It's a common engineering problem. The larger you make something, you got to account for that because it's heavier and the material doesn't get any stronger as you're making it larger, so you need to design things a little differently. And basically for this one, the holes in the center of the jig are drilled straight up and down, and I do a few rings of those, and the next set of rings I have drilled at a 10-degree cant. I do a couple of rings of those, and then I do a couple more rings at a 15-degree cant, and then the last holes drilled in the jig are at a 20-degree cant, and those screws, you can kind of visually see what's going on there, and that does two things. It's going to lead to a stronger trunk in your tree, and it's also going to make it easier to make the roots and make the roots a little stronger so that you don't end up with a tree that falls over because it's too heavy. But that leads to other issues from doing that, which we'll get into later. And the next thing about the wire holding jig here, it's kind of hard to see. We'll get in there close and see if... Okay, there, you can see that. All those holes are countersunk. They're 1/8 inch holes, and each hole will hold 3 strands of the wire that we were using in the previous series of videos, or they can hold 1 strand of the next size up in that same brand of wire. So this is kind of a multi-purpose jig. And the bottom is also countersunk, and the reason why I do that countersinking, and there's 2 reasons. If you got a sharp edge up there at the top of the hole, when you twist the wire, it tends to put a little crease in the wire there, and that makes a weak spot in the wire. And the countersinking on the bottom part of the jig helps make it easier to pull the tree out of the jig once you have the top done and you're ready to start working on the roots. The more wires that you have in the piece of plastic, the harder it gets to actually pull the tree out of the jig. So that's why I countersink both sides. And now on to the stand itself. The stand itself is 24 1/4 inches tall, and it's made from 1/2 inch Radius maple plywood. That's what they make skateboards out of. The maple plywood is just really, really strong stuff. Those skateboards, you know, they can take an amazing amount of abuse before they break. So that's why I went with the maple plywood. And the radius part of the plywood, having that curve on there really increases the rigidity of the stand. You don't want your stand flexing when you're twisting on the trunk, because that saps your energy that you're putting into twisting up that thick trunk. And believe me, you need to have all the energy you can muster to twist up a really thick trunk. And the design of this stand here really makes a strong stand with the least amount of wood. Stands I've made in the past were a lot bigger, and I would run into the problem of the stand would actually get in the way of making the tree, because the further you go out here, when you're working with these large trees, you've got 4 foot of wire coming out there, and if you pull the branch, that's going to go down a little bit, and you're twisting it, that the stand actually gets in the way and causes problems. So that's one reason why I built the stand the way it is. And the other reason is, I'm going to slide this over, is the other problem I'd have with stands is that, you know, the stand wants to spin when you twist on it. So I don't know if you can see there, the design of this stand, when you put your feet like that, it locks the bottom of the stand so it can't spin. And I think that's going to work out really good for me. And so if you're going to, you know, that's not the only way to make a stand, but as far as I can figure, this is the best design I can come up with. And the other thing about it is it just looks funky as heck. It's wild every way. I mean, it's perfectly trilaterally symmetrical, but any way you look at it, it kind of looks screwy, and I kind of like that. So I'm sure a couple people are going to be like, hey, I want one of them stands. So if people are interested, I can make one and you know, ship it to you. The price on them would be $120 plus whatever it costs to ship them, and I've probably got enough wood to make 2 more of them, and one of them is for me. So the first 2 people that contact me, you know, through the comments or the email, will be the people who get them. First come, first served. And who knows, maybe you guys just all want to build your own stands, and that's cool too. So yeah, but if there's high demand, you know, I can get everybody a stand who wants one eventually, but you know, I suppose the proper way to do this would be first come, first served. And you know, if you want one that that's my favorite kind of reddish brown color, I tend to stain everything. And if you want one unstained, I suppose we could go, you know, $110 if you want it just natural. Staining them really doesn't take much effort. They're pretty tricky to build though, this radius plywood. You know, measuring and cutting flat rectangular plywood ain't that tough, but once you start working with this curved plywood, boy, it gets kind of tricky. But at any rate, so that's the first video in this series, and hope everybody's having fun twisting their trees. Oh, and another thing, if you haven't made any smaller trees, I really highly suggest you don't start a really large high strand count tree. It'd probably drive you nuts. And the other nice thing about this stand is, you know, it'd be good for working on you know, intermediate and large trees. I kind of tried to build it to be an all-purpose stand because I'm sick of, you know, making individual stands for the big trees, and all the ones I've made in the past, slowly but surely I'd destroy them making the tree because I put a lot of rotational torque into them, and so that's why I built this one. But at any rate, I hope everybody's having fun, and I guess I'll talk to you guys soon. Bye.